For the second time in the series, we get to see a bit of how Michael behaves when expectations are just a little bit lower than normal.
There is a very big difference between Michael trying and Michael not trying.
That's right, today we're taking a look at the first steps after this fateful moment.
We're moving to Colorado.
All of us?
Yep.
Wait, what?
Holly has to go back to Colorado. I'm going with her. I'm leaving.
Hey, I'm Chris and I'm reviewing every episode of The Office ever, and today we're looking at Training Day. Lots to talk about here, between the shocking inclusion of Will Farrell, the American Southwest, some butt kissing, and a ton of content that was cut from today's episode. So with that, let's dive into the Training Day.
Warning! Warning! Warning!
I understand nothing.
While we don't get an exact amount of time between this moment and this moment, it's pretty clear that Dunder Mifflin wanted to move quickly to replace Michael. In the business world, moving this quickly can mean one of two things. It's possible that someone in DMS's recruiting department had already headhunted Deangelo and was just waiting for a position to open up, which would explain why they were able to rush him off to Scranton to start working while staying in a local hotel. The other possibility might be actually playing on the cut idea from real early in Season 7's pre-production, which had Michael's departure centering around being unceremoniously fired from the company due to a really minor infraction.
Twice hard. I really will. I know I've been complacent and I'll turn this place around.
So it's possible that the reason that Deangelo was so readily available was because they were about to fire Michael before he quit. Okay, so hold up. After meeting with my inner circle, I realized that I'm kind of an idiot. I totally forgot this happened.
I see this guy trying to steal this lady's dog, so I grab the dog. He runs off. She's so grateful, she hires me.
So it was definitely the latter thing. Deangelo was benched, waiting for a position to open up. So sorry for the interruption, and now back to our regularly scheduled field guide. What we do know is that Deangelo is for sure here now, and he is quite the divisive character. I listed him as number 8 in my top 10 most hated characters of The Office video I did last year, and I was interested to see how the comments would shake out there, and it's actually pretty on par. I'd say that 8 in every 10 Office fans seem to have a general distaste for this character, which is really interesting to me, as I think there's enough on-screen bait to hate the character. But there's probably also some psychological reasons why Deangelo gets the venomous lashing he does from the fandom. But we're going to talk about that more in a little bit. Now, you'd be forgiven if the sudden appearance of Will Farrell was a bit jarring, and that's because The Office had tended to shy away from casting well-known celebrities, especially for main characters. I think they'd previously justified some of these cameos due to studio pressure, or just to add a little gravitas. But to put one of the biggest comedic movie stars at that time on screen of The Office for such a major role was a huge risk for the series. Now, according to a Deadline article from 2011, the reason Will Farrell appeared at Dunder Mifflin in the first place was because he, quote, called the producers and offered his services because he was a fan and wanted to commemorate Carell's swan song by taking part in The Office's star's 7th and final season on the show. I have to say, as a fan of The Office, to the point that I have dedicated an immense amount of time over the last several years analyzing every episode of it, this was a mistake.
No!
I understand the temptation when a huge named actor who already has great on-screen rapport with your lead actor calls you while you're trying to desperately write a send-off for a character who was never supposed to leave in the first place. I get how that makes sense. I can see how that is a light at the end of the tunnel for them. Cast a big name comedian who's presumably loved by the same core demographic of viewers that your show is, keeping in mind that this was still very much during an era when moving from film to television was considered a demotion. All of this seems so good on paper. A stroke of good luck to transition from a difficult departure of Carell from the series, and all of this being locked into place months and months before an episode would have a final draft on real paper.
Do you even know how paper is made?
I don't envy Paul Lieberstein's job of trying to run this show during this era, but the decision to cast Will Farrell was almost unilaterally reviled by fans, even those who loved the actor. Between the weird character decisions that Farrell went with, the somewhat choppy and awkward writing, and even oddly enough, some of the editing decisions for the character all combine into a sign that the series might be in trouble if this was the direction that The Office would be taking.
Uh-oh.
Again, more on that later. The episode begins with Michael and Deangelo's meet cute in the bar. Their banter here feels like every conversation I've ever had with anyone at a business convention.
Do not tell my fiance I'm drinking on a Wednesday.
I won't. I don't know her.
These interactions are like picking up someone at a bar. You slowly flirt and throw out more details about yourself until you hook the other person in and you just nerd out together.
You know what? I would like to try the luge, though.
Try it once, you're hooked. That's my guess.
In fairness, I've never picked up anyone at a bar, and I actively avoid all of these conversations at business conventions, which is a double win in my book. For now, it's clear that Michael and Deangelo are hitting it off quite well, as the original cut of this episode jumps from this vodka request,
Bartender, let's get some vodka up in this cranberry and one for my friend.
straight to The Office, but the full cut has plenty more bonding.
Her breast different?
No panties on this one.
Okay, good.
Are you kidding me?
You know what would be a great Onion headline? Cancer prevents cancer.
And a joke was cut to pay off this from the aired cold opening.
We should write a movie or something.
The Adventure Pals by Deangelo Vickers and Michael Scott. Oh my gosh, it's 150 pages long.
For the remainder of the episode, there's generally just one plot line, and it's the passing of time. As in a change up from most episodes we've gotten over the last couple of years, this is just the day in the life of a paper company. Everyone is reacting to Deangelo's presence in the office. Dwight's coming to grips that he's encountered yet another career setback, this time specifically at the hands of Michael. Jim and Pam are, I think intentionally by the writing, being cringe over trying to win Jeremetrius by bringing up their baby again and again. Kelly's trying to become Mrs. Vickers, and with Deangelo's proclivity to the American Southwest, that might actually be working.
What is the Native American girl's name?
Am I reading that right? I'm not sure. Creed and Stanley are oddly attentive throughout this day.
We can't wait to learn it all, right, guys? Again, welcome.
Andy's caught in the first impressions of being the funny guy. Aaron is caught in the middle of a boss off. Oscar is, well, oddly enough, Oscar is the only one who seems indifferent to the guy. Kevin likens himself to a guy who's typecasted as a dumb guy.
It's not Ashton Kutcher, it's Kevin Malone. Equally handsome, equally smart.
Also, I think it was around this time that the Emmys did that skit with Kutcher in the office. Can we get that clip?
No. I'm pretty sure I'm taking over as the new lead.
And Michael is dealing with watching his staff take to his replacement.
They're all treating him like he's some sort of god. You know, they used to say that I was the world's best boss.
Which does lead us to some of the deleted content, which includes an entire cut plotline of Deangelo's struggle with weight in the past. Dwight's detective work found some old photos of Deangelo, and I'm assuming it was just on Facebook if his past detective work is any clue.
2 years ago, she was selling a mountain bike.
Michael attempts to skew the office's opinions of Deangelo into the red, but Vickers' reaction is pretty classy and it wins over the crowd.
Guess how much weight I lost?
202 pounds?
203. I beat it by 1. I beat it by 1.
Cutting this was probably a good idea, as having Michael fat shame a guy right before he takes off is just, it's a weird bit, but also none of it's really funny. However, with it out, the cake thing in a couple episodes makes very little sense. The episode concludes with Michael throwing peanut butter and jelly sandwiches around with no regard to the new boss's nut allergy. This causes Deangelo to go into the conference room,
Multi-purpose room.
call a meeting, and the staff goes on in. After throwing away the tray of PB&J sandwiches,
What a waste.
Deangelo gets why Michael's having a hard time with this and extends an olive branch. The episode concludes with Deangelo going with the office staff and Michael closing his office door, representing the two very different directions that they're going. And I can't think of any better point than this to dive into the deeper meaning.
I have broken a few boards in my day. Diving boards at my family pool in Reading. I was an obese child.
What does a bean mean?
Someone please explain it to Cap.
I can see it now. Someone in the writer's room was like, let's do it like 2001's Training Day. We'll have Michael showing the new guy around, and we could see the differences in them, ultimately leading them down two very separate paths. And everyone was like, yeah, no notes.
King Kong ain't got shit on me!
By the way, Training Day was when Ethan Hawke could play a good guy. There's a weird dynamic in this episodic iteration of The Office. I'm actually imagining that a relationship chart was probably needed in order to categorize how everyone might react to the new boss. Love him or hate him, everyone's out to protect their job and status within the office, which does feel like a really rooted and grounded concept, for a while at least. I will admit, every time Daryl turns that corner dressed to the nines, I'm there for it, but for the most part, it does feel somewhat grounded. Working for a large company, there have been occasions where I've reported to the same boss years on end, and then there's been times where I've changed bosses 5 times in a single calendar year. Every time the head of the table is swapped out, I'd watch coworkers panic, stress, and act super out of character in order to please the newbie. And I'm sure I've fallen prey to this myself, but I tend to overall be pretty immune to some of that due to my natural outlook on things and relatively not having many emotions at all, which does allow me then to just enjoy the show. And I'll admit, that specific angle of Training Day did resonate with me. Now, Dwight's angle, though, that's a little bit more close to home, as I've had the exact same literal thing happen to me, in which I had a job that I was in line for several years just be given away to someone right out from under me. And then, I mean, I had done the trainings, I talked the talk, I did all the corporate-y stuff you're supposed to do, and then a decision was made several levels above me, and the whole thing was just really disheartening. So I mean it when I say that this episode's premise has merit, and though Michael has grown significantly throughout the season, it is somewhat good to still see him battling with some of those same struggles he's always had. It's a way of displaying that while Michael has his eyes on the prize, it's still going to be hard to leave everything he's known. But I don't want to talk about any of that, and that's because all of this feels very meta, right? Knowing that Farrell was brought in to ease the transition from a post-Michael office while watching the exact same transition struggle to happen on screen has all the makings of a very transcendent episode. Think about it like this. Michael is training Deangelo on how to take the reins of the office. But we don't see any of that. Instead, this episode takes the angle of how every employee is going to react to this massive change, ultimately leading to this very shot. And I guess the hope from Daniel Chun was that audiences would at best love to, or at worst begrudgingly, opt to follow Deangelo into the conference room with the overwhelming majority of our beloved characters, rather than to hang on and follow Michael. In that, it gives us some start to the closure. Remember that Deadline article I cited earlier in the video? Well, that was written in January of 2011, while this episode aired in mid-April, meaning that Farrell was always intended to have only a brief stint on the show. And that was well known at the time in the fandom. Knowing that his arc was always intended to be short-lived, then I would say that Training Day, along with Deangelo's entire arc, was attempting to train us, or at least reinforce a message that Michael is not The Office. This is The Office. Continuing this line of thinking, perhaps I'm giving them too much credit here, but I also wonder if Andy's plotline of having to constantly up his antics just to keep Deangelo happy, leading him into this depressed state of high creative status, is actually a very real reflection of how the back of the house of The Office felt about their very real and frustrating predicament of managing fan expectations and still creating something genuinely good for this series.
I guess this is my life now.
But most of all, I wonder if Michael's words,
Why did you have to be so damn good?
are intended as a way for us to find some comfort and care in the direction that the show would be headed in. But did it work?
This is the worst!
No, it did not. Earning one of the lowest scores of the season, Training Day is seemingly overwhelmingly considered a misstep by The Office fandom. Was it the choice to stunt cast a huge Hollywood comedian
I drive a Dodge Stratus!
in your grounded mockumentary? Or maybe it was the decision to have Michael revert back to a child mid-episode, making everything about himself. And perhaps it was a decision, and I really am just speculating here, to allow Carell and Farrell to improvise a lot of the humor, which can be funny, but it definitely leads to a slower pace. Could it be that Jim and Pam are insufferably trying to baby pander, something that they've straight up to this point in the series have not done whatsoever? Is it possible that it could be that Dwight is all of a sudden a very real and relatable character, with a lot of angst? I think the answer to all of those is a resounding yes. A lot of decisions were made here, at multiple levels of all of the people pulling levers. Overall, this episode is sluggishly paced, lacking significant source of laughs, but it fails to do two things the writers set out to do in the first place. Does it pay off Michael leaving? I mean, it sort of does in the final seconds. And the other goal of season 7 is, did it really cast hooks in for the different characters? Outside of Dwight's shocking depth, I'd argue that writing everyone as one-dimensional and awkward versions of their former selves was probably not the right way to go here. I do have some ideas on how they could have fixed all of this. First, at the end of Garage Sale, a teaser should have been included about a new boss already being hired. This would have set fan expectations to dwell on this rather than jolting us into this plotline in the next episode. Next, strip all of Michael's jealousy out of this episode. We don't need it. Several times this season, we've already seen Michael grow through his fear of being overshadowed. Further, he knows by now that these people, or at least a subset of them, do genuinely care for him. Seeing Michael behave so poorly, especially in the extended cut, is just bad taste.
I think right now I'm going to change this supermodel back into Kevin Malone. Oh, there he is.
Instead of Michael being an immature monster, have him shadow the new guy, giving tips and tricks along the way. It's an old bit, but it'd be an easy callback to the several times we've seen it before. This would lead to plenty of jokes as well as emotional depth from Michael, but mainly as he fades into the background slowly throughout the runtime. The A-plot should probably be a sequence of meet and greets, a very common business practice for new bosses. Michael could sit in and provide jokes and commentary for each employee. This would allow the writers to provide those more intimate exchanges between Michael, Deangelo, and the employee, drawing depth, drama, and comedy from the relationships while bouncing off all of the new dynamics of having a new boss. I enjoy the nuance that Farrell brought to this role, especially the watch. So I think there's an opportunity here to still have all of that be present without the slapstick. It would also give us a chance to see some of that difficulty Michael's having with leaving the company. As for the subplot, personally knowing that Farrell was only going to be on screen for at most 4 episodes, the absolute best hook I think they could have set in this very episode would revolve around 4 employees battling to become the number 2, as they think they should have been Michael's replacement in the first place. This would focus on Jim, Dwight, Andy, and Daryl, each of these characters aiming to please and impress Deangelo. This would be an extremely natural thing in the business world, and it would create a comedy and drama well that the writers could pull from leading all the way into next season. Thus, the B-plot in Training Day would explore the polite office politics as they all discuss Deangelo behind his back, getting to explore what they really think about him, juxtaposed to how they treat him face to face, getting to see their own ambitions come to light. I think that they also probably didn't need Farrell in the first place, but maybe they could have replaced him with a Louis C.K. type actor who could maybe do a more of a straight man take, and then I think we just fixed The Office. Instead, what we got was just somewhat of a mess, a cluttered composition of group dynamics, little depth, and little reason to feel secure about the future of the series. And I can vividly remember the excitement when I first started this episode in 2011. I was eager to see how they were going to send off Michael, and I remember when those closing credits started, just thinking, is that it? All up, I give Training Day a 2 out of 5.
I'm adequate.
Mostly because of what it should have been. But that's just what I think about this episode. Every time I rate something kind of low, someone will inevitably hop in the comments and explain why this is their favorite episode of the series. So I would love to hear what you have to say there. Maybe you'll change my opinion. That has happened several times now. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on them bringing in Farrell in the first place, as well as how they handled the character of Deangelo in general. Don't worry, I won't shred every episode from now through season 9 like this. I just really get disappointed with this one because of what it could have been. Which is a great segue. I'm eager to jump into Michael's last Dundee episode, but I'm going to do one more ancillary video before we get there, and that's a top 10 list of the best episodes of The Office, at least what I think at this point, after Michael left, which I think is going to be fun to look at. Then we'll dive into the last Dundies, and then we're home free for the rest of the season from there. So with that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.